Hey folks, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. If you're hearing a little bit of background noise, that's rain. There's a hurricane coming, and so we're going to do a video on a slightly shorter topic, actually questions from you guys on one topic, and that's airbrush compressors and airbrush system setup. And if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer and lure maker, and an avid fisherman. And I make these videos to try to add a little bit of science and engineering to the art of lure making, and to answer some of the questions that you guys have on some of the technical parts of setting up a little lure shop like mine. Let's look at my airbrush setup. This is the manifold for my system. On the other side of this wall is a shop compressor, and it's nice that it's not in my space because it makes a lot of noise. The compressed air comes directly from the compressor into this manifold, which includes this regulator combination with an air dryer, which then feeds down to a secondary air dryer. And then I have this big air pressure gauge, which allows me to really refine the pressure I'm using to airbrush, right down to a half a PSI. And if this seems like a really elaborate setup, that's because it is. And it's not necessary to have something this elaborate. You don't have to have all this space. You don't have to have a dedicated painting booth. All you need is a little space where you can set up a counter and put a little compressor. So I'm going to show you some really simple alternatives to this craziness that just about anybody can get and fit into their workspace. In fact, we're going to try out something I've never tried, and that's a little self-contained compressor airbrush set that's no bigger than a tissue box. Let's see how it works. Stick around. So my question is, how simple a system can I set up? How small, how inexpensive, and how space efficient a system can I set up and still be able to airbrush pretty well? So I reached out to this company, Ergo, and they put out a line of airbrush products that are under the TimberTech name. And what was attractive to me about their products is that they basically have everything, including a really tiny, completely self-contained compressor that comes with essentially everything you need, including the airbrush. And they also have this larger sort of master set that comes with a big compressor that has a volume tank, a hose. It even comes with some paint and an airbrush. Let's go ahead and unbox this thing. And it does come with a little starter kit of basic opaque colors. These may not be the ultimate paints you want to use. They'll definitely get you through those first couple of days of learning how to use the airbrush. It comes with a nice braided cloth jacketed air feed hose. So let's see how long it is. I don't know if it's a cultural thing. Whenever I encountered these little twist ties that are twisted in the wrong direction, you know, rightsy-tightsy, and they do lefty-tightsy, and just drives me crazy. Anyway, so let's see how long it is. And I just measured it on a yardstick and folded it in half. It's 3 feet, so it's a total of 6 feet long. I have to say, I'm actually a little bit impressed right out of the box. The tank looks nicely constructed. The welds look pretty good. The feet are really nice. They're suction cup feet, but they don't really suction down. They're just broad rubber feet that I think are meant to absorb the vibration of the compressor motor. This head is the compressor itself, and of course it's driven by a motor that's back here. This little polished tube feeds down into the tank. There's a little valve right here with a little red cover and a little split ring on it, and that's a spring-loaded overpressure valve. That's just for safety. And on this end of the compressor you have your regulator with a little pressure gauge, and this is actually your adjustment knob to set the pressure. And to do that you just pull up on it and rotate it left or right. Clockwise increases the pressure, anti-clockwise decreases the pressure. So besides the paint and the hose, it also comes with its own airbrush, which is really nice. That's one less thing a beginner airbrusher has to think about. And if you've been watching this channel you know that I've tested a bunch of inexpensive sort of entry-level airbrushes and contrasted them with some of the higher end airbrushes. And while there's always a difference, that difference is not going to be a big game changer for most people that are just getting started. For the price of a really high-end airbrush, you can usually get 5 or 6 of these. The point is, you can get started with an airbrush like this, learn how to use it, and not worry that you're going to damage it and be out a couple $100. So you do get a double action airbrush, which means that the airbrush controls the airflow by pushing the button down and the paint flow by pulling the button back. And this is the style airbrush you really want to learn to use. It gives you the most versatility for really detail work or broad spraying work. It's got a larger size cup. Everything's polished pretty nicely. It comes with a hose barb fitting if you end up having to use a hose that just pushes on a barb, which we won't need to. It comes with a little wrench, and this is for removing the little spray nozzle at the very end. It comes off by unscrewing with the wrench. And you have your spray needle, and the needle is a 0.2 millimeter. But you have the option, I think, on these things that you can order it either 0.2 or 0.25, 0.3, 0.4, or 0.5. And it feels pretty nice in your hand. It's not the lightest airbrush, but these big cups generally add a little bit of nose weight. And you get a little set of cleaning brushes. And there you go. You got different size cleaning brushes for the different areas of that airbrush. And this is a really nice little addition. If you're going to have your compressor close to your work, you can just put this on there. And now you have a nice airbrush holder that will free your hands as you change paint colors or you decide to move to another airbrush. All right, so before we can plug it in, we've got to connect our air hose, and that just goes on with your fingers. No tools needed. There's a little port right here at the regulator. There's a little output, and then the other end goes to our airbrush. Rightsy tightsy, people. And let's plug it in, see what it sounds like. The switch is on the back. All right, it's pretty quiet. Let me go ahead and plug in my old pump that doesn't have an accumulator tank or a volume tank and let you hear what it sounds like in contrast. It's a little louder and you can hear how quickly it cycles. About every 5 seconds it cycles off. And avoiding that is really the beauty of having a volume tank attached to the actual system so that you don't have this compressor cycling every 5 seconds. The regulator adjusts the pressure that's coming to your airbrush through that hose. And the pressure gauge shows you that pressure that you're setting for your airbrush. What it doesn't show is how much pressure is actually in the tank. And I want to know what that is, so I'm going to make sure that this regulator is set to full pressure. And I think that's got it right there. And I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to turn it on and see how high the pressure comes up. And that should be the pressure in the tank. All right, looks like 60 psi is what we're looking at. And it's holding pressure pretty nice, so we know there's no leaks. And typically you're not going to use a pressure that high on your airbrush. So you're going to set your airbrush pressure down to about 30 psi. And you do that by turning the regulator counterclockwise. And that's got us right there. And that feels right. And the beauty of having the volume tank is that you can actually paint for a little while before this thing will cycle on. And you won't be tormented by it coming on every 3 to 5 seconds. It'll take probably quite a bit here before it actually kicks on. Oh yeah, you can really paint quite a bit before this comes on. There it goes. And the weight of the whole unit is, I would say, somewhere between 5 and 6 kilograms or 10 to 12 pounds. Not the kind of thing you want to like lug around with you anywhere, but it's certainly easy to pull out of a closet and put it in your workspace and then return it to even a high shelf in a closet. All right, let's try it out. Let's see how well it paints and how well this keeps up with the work. And we'll start out with the black that they sent along with the kit. Now, just by shaking it, I can tell that it's thinned down enough to go directly into the gun. Thinning paints can be really one of the most frustrating parts of beginning airbrushing. So let's start with just a little dot. That's pretty nice. Yeah, I mean, you've got the ability with a gun like this to really work your way to fine lines, to thick lines. You can do some shading if you want to. Definitely have enough control for the kind of things we do with lure. Now, a gun like this probably is not going to be suitable to fine art, but for this kind of thing, it's a great way to get started. And one of the things that you're going to find when you buy sort of entry-level airbrushes is that the quality of the needle isn't going to be quite what you see in the high end, for sure. They're not as highly polished, and they're not made from as hard a material. So you have to be very careful not to damage the tip. But they work just fine. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll show you a hack on how to get this thing to be almost a high-end needle. So I was pretty certain this was going to be a reasonable product. Now I want to see if that little tiny desktop compressor is actually going to work at all. All right, let's get this thing open. Let's see what we got. I've never tried one of these. I've seen them on the internet and been intrigued to know whether something this small could actually do the job. Well, we got the same hose. Here's the compressor unit, and it comes with a power supply. It also comes with a nice little airbrush, and I like it better than the other one because it has the really small paint reservoir at the top. See what this looks like? You can see it's pretty doggone small. It's about 6 inches by 6 inches and weighs probably 1.25 pounds. It also comes with a little attachment that you can set your airbrush in, which is nice and handy. Now the on switch is actually a variable switch, so I imagine that's to control how much volume you're actually getting, because it doesn't have any kind of pressure setting, so I imagine this is just volume. But again, this does not feel cheap. It feels like good hard plastic. It's got nice rubber vibration absorbing feet that you can see just by moving it like this. It allows it to wiggle without vibrating your entire desk. Rightsy-tightsy, people. Jeez. And our connection for the airbrush, it's the same style connection. And the airbrush comes with a slightly larger needle. This is a 0.3 millimeter, which it may make a difference on how well I can paint with it, because that's what I'm used to painting with. Again, it feels pretty smooth, double action, just like the other one. And that paint reservoir is nice and small, easy to clean. So we'll go ahead and connect the hose that came with it to the airbrush. All right, let's turn it on. So at the very lowest setting, you can see it's going to kick off every time I use any air at all. So let's set it at medium. Oh, it's a little faster is what it is. So there's not going to be much of a difference between the time you press your button and get this thing actually running. There's probably a tiny little accumulator in there so that there's some air when you press the button initially. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it all the way up, and you can really hear it. And it's probably preset at about 25 to 30 psi. The question is that going to work? Let's set a clean piece of paper in there and see. And we'll use the blue paint this time. And all I really need is a couple of drops in here, maybe 4. All right, so first little bit is always a big question mark. That's pretty nice, actually. Yeah, the gun actually has a little better. Not sure you'll see the tiniest of the dots. And as we go up, yeah, it has a nice edge on the dot. Yeah, the lines are a little crisper, and it might just be that the needle is the size needle I'm used to using. So I'm super impressed with this thing. I can't believe it actually keeps up with the amount of paint I'm putting out. Yes, it's running while I'm using the gun, but that's to be expected. It's an on-demand kind of compressor. But let's do a comparison with my little Harbor Freight pump, and I'm going to turn it on, let it come up to pressure. I've got it. I'm going to set it at 35 psi, and you can hear it run, right? Look, the minute I press the trigger, it starts running. It runs louder and more often than that little desktop, which is completely absurd. Actually, I'll be really honest, I didn't think this was going to work at all. I thought we were going to have a little fun with something that doesn't work. And you can hear this thing just running constantly almost. So you can see that this runs almost as continuously as the little desktop. I thought this thing was going to be a joke. I really thought that it was going to be so marginal that I wouldn't be able to use it. If you got little space in your shop, or you don't have a shop, you're working at your laundry room or a spare closet or whatever, and you just need something to airbrush every now and then, or airbrush something small like lures or model planes and model cars, this is a viable option. All right, so now the hack to actually improve the performance of your needle. Just get your needle out, make sure it's relatively clean and dry, and you're going to need some 4/0 steel wool. This is super fine steel wool, really meant for cleaning and polishing. It's not your standard steel wool, it's very fine. Put the back end, not the front end, not the pointy end, but the back end of your needle into the chuck of an electric drill. A light cordless one is best, and just wrap the steel wool around it so that you have one good solid pinched point where your fingers come together, and just spin the chuck and just very slowly move down the needle, making sure your fingers are pinched pretty firmly. And already I can feel the difference, and you can actually see, I'm not sure the camera will pick it up, but it actually has more of a reflective sheen to it. Before it was a dull gray. So I'm going to do that 2 or 3 times. I pause a little bit at the very tip, and it just absolutely polishes this out so it's almost perfectly silky smooth. Now you can do this to any needle on any airbrush, and in fact I do it to all my airbrushes. After I've used it quite a bit, they do tend to etch a little after you've cleaned the paint off a few times, and so polishing it out really helps the performance. And if you want to take this to the next level, get yourself some polishing compound. This is not wax, this is automotive polishing compound. And I'll just fold up a paper towel, dampen it a little bit, and then get a little bit of this compound on there, and we're going to do the same thing. We'll wrap this up, remember, pointy side out, and then just go nice and slowly down it. And if you don't notice a difference, I'm going to be shocked. In fact, I'd like to challenge you guys to go ahead and try this on the airbrushes you already have and tell me how much of a difference it actually makes, because it always makes a big difference with how easy the trigger is and how cleanly the paint comes out of the nozzle. All right, so the final verdict is both of these work really well. This little compressor is super impressive in that it's a very small package and it really does the job. And I really did think that this was going to be one of those product reviews that turns out in a bit of a chuckle, but this really works. Considering it comes with a nice airbrush, the price point is pretty phenomenal. I think it's right around 46 bucks. So you get a compressor and an airbrush with a hose ready to go for $46. That's pretty doggone good. The big compressor setup with its own airbrush and the paints run right at 105 bucks. So I'm not trying to do a big sales pitch here. I'm just saying I'm impressed with the quality and the price point. So if anybody's interested in checking this out, I'll go ahead and put a link to the website in the description, and I'm going to ask and see if they'll give me a discount code that I can share with you guys. No guarantees, but if I can finagle it, I'm happy to pass on a little bit of savings to you guys. And thank you to everybody who offers comments and questions that actually sparks the content that I'm making. And as far as what I'm going to do with these two compressors, since I've got a setup, this one's going to eventually go in my sailboat, where I plan to make a little lure lab, and this one I think I'm going to give away to subscribers, and I'll let you know how I'm going to do that in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next Friday. Of course, it's impossible to get out of the packaging. All right, let's see. Come on. This is going to be the hardest part of this whole video. Really? Good. Rethink the packaging, folks. Just a little blister pack would have just been fine. Your spray needle? Rightsy-tightsy, people. Jeez.